The coffee mug slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor in a symphony of ceramic and finality. My father's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "What the hell is wrong with you, Maya?" I stood there, 19 years old, watching the dark liquid seep between the tiles. My mother appeared in the doorway, her silk robe pristine despite the early hour, her expression already hardening before she even knew what had happened. "I'm pregnant," I said, the words falling as definitively as the broken pieces at my feet. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating. My mother's hand flew to her throat, her perfectly manicured fingers pressing against her pearls. My father, Dr. Richard Blackwell, respected cardiac surgeon and pillar of our Connecticut community, took a step back as if I'd physically struck him. "You're what?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "4 months," I continued, my hand instinctively moving to my still flat stomach. "I kept waiting for the right moment to tell you, but there isn't one, is there?" My father's face cycled through emotions: shock, disappointment, rage, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Shame, maybe. Not for me, but because of me. "Who?" he demanded. "Who did this to you?" "Nobody did anything to me, Dad. I made a choice." "A choice?" His voice rose, echoing off the vaulted ceilings of our pristine kitchen. "You call throwing your life away a choice? You're supposed to start at Columbia in the fall. You have a full scholarship. We've spent 19 years preparing you for your life," I interrupted. "Not mine." My mother finally moved, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she approached. When she spoke, her voice carried the controlled fury I remembered from my childhood, the tone that could cut deeper than screaming. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Not just to yourself, but to us? Your father has patients who trust him, who look up to him. What will they think when they find out his own daughter couldn't keep her legs closed?" The words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stand straighter. "They'll think I'm human." "They'll think we failed," she snapped. "And maybe we did. Maybe we gave you too much freedom, too much trust." My father was pacing now, his hands running through his graying hair. "This is fixable," he said suddenly, stopping mid-stride. "It's still early enough. We can take care of this quietly, privately. I know people—" "No." The single word hung between us like a barrier. "No?" My mother's voice cracked. "Maya, you're not thinking clearly. You're a child yourself. You can't possibly understand what you're saying. I'm keeping my baby." My father's face flushed red. "Over my dead body. If that's what it takes." What happened next would replay in my mind for years. My father, this man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had read me bedtime stories, who had once told me I could be anything I wanted to be, looked at me with complete disgust. "Then you're not my daughter." The words should have broken me. Maybe they did, just a little. But something else rose up in their place. Something fierce and protective and absolutely certain. "Fine," I said. "Then I don't need you to be my father." My mother gasped. "Maya, please, you're being dramatic. Just think about this rationally. You could still have children someday when you're ready, when you're married to someone appropriate." "Someone you approve of, you mean?" "Someone who can provide for you," my father interjected. "Someone with a future, with prospects. Not some college dropout who got you pregnant and ran." I could have told them then. I could have explained that Marcus wasn't a dropout, that he was actually a graduate student at Yale studying environmental law, that he came from a family just as accomplished as ours. I could have mentioned that we'd been together for over a year, that I loved him, that he wanted to marry me despite our young age. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something crucial. Their disapproval wasn't about Marcus at all. It was about control. It was about the fact that I had made a decision, a life-altering decision, without their permission. "Pack your things," my father said finally. "If you're so determined to be an adult, then you can live like one. Somewhere else." My mother's composure finally cracked. "Richard, she's our daughter." "No," he said, never taking his eyes off me. "Our daughter would have trusted us. Our daughter would have come to us for help. This is just someone who shares our DNA." The pain of those words was physical, a sharp twist in my chest that made it hard to breathe. But I didn't cry. I couldn't give them that satisfaction. "I'll be gone by tonight," I said. As I turned to leave, my mother called out, "Maya, wait, please. We can work this out. We just need time to process." "You had 4 months to process," I said without turning around. "You chose to be disappointed instead of supportive. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of grandparents you'd be." I left them there in their perfect kitchen, surrounded by the shards of their perfect life, and went upstairs to pack the pieces of mine. The apartment Marcus and I found was tiny, a one-bedroom in New Haven that smelled faintly of the Thai restaurant downstairs. The walls were thin, the radiator clanged all night, and the bathroom had a persistent leak that left rust stains in the tub. It was nothing like the sprawling colonial I'd grown up in, with its manicured grounds and imported marble countertops. It was perfect. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked for the 100th time as we carried boxes up the narrow stairs. His dark hair was damp with sweat, his usually pristine button-down wrinkled and untucked. Even exhausted and worried, he was beautiful, all sharp cheekbones and intense brown eyes that seemed to see straight through me. "I'm sure," I said, setting down a box of my books. "Are you?" He stopped what he was doing and looked at me. Really looked at me, the way he had that first day in Professor Chen's environmental ethics class when I'd argued that individual consumer choices were just corporate propaganda designed to shift blame away from systemic issues. "I've been sure since the moment you told me," he said quietly. "I just wish..." "Wish what?" "I wish they could see what I see when I look at you." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them away. "What do you see?" "Strength, intelligence. A woman who stands up for what she believes in, even when it costs her everything." "It hasn't cost me everything," I said, moving closer to him. "It's given me you. It's given us this." He pulled me against his chest, and for a moment, surrounded by boxes and peeling wallpaper and the distant smell of pad thai, I felt more at home than I ever had in my parents' mansion. The first few months were harder than I'd expected. Not the pregnancy. That was progressing smoothly, despite my parents' dire predictions. It was everything else. The isolation, the whispers from acquaintances who'd heard about the Blackwell family scandal, the way my father's colleagues would cross the street to avoid me when I ran errands in town. But the hardest part was the silence from home. Not a single call, not a text, not even a card when my 20th birthday came and went. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist in their world. Marcus tried to fill the void with his own family's warmth. His parents, both professors at a small liberal arts college in Vermont, welcomed me with open arms and excited tears when we told them about the pregnancy. His mother, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, immediately began knitting tiny sweaters, while his father, Dr. James Thompson, started researching the best pediatricians in the area. "We know this isn't ideal timing," Elena said during one of our weekend visits, her hands never pausing in their knitting. "But babies have their own schedules, don't they? And you two, you have such good heads on your shoulders, you'll figure it out." It was exactly what I needed to hear, and exactly what my own mother should have said. The contrast was painful. Marcus graduated that spring, just as my belly began to show. He'd been accepted to several law schools, but deferred enrollment to stay close to me during the pregnancy. Instead, he took a job with a local environmental nonprofit, making barely enough to cover our rent and groceries. "It's temporary," he assured me as we counted out bills on our kitchen table. "Once the baby's born and you're ready, we'll both go back to school. We'll make it work." I believed him because I had to. Because the alternative, that I had indeed thrown my life away, just as my parents had predicted, was too terrible to contemplate. Lily Rose Thompson Blackwell was born on a rainy Tuesday in October, weighing 6 pounds, 3 ounces. She had Marcus's dark hair and my stubborn chin, and when she wrapped her tiny fist around my finger, I understood for the first time what unconditional love really meant. The first person I wanted to call was my mother. Instead, I called Elena, who drove down from Vermont in the middle of the night to hold her granddaughter and cry happy tears. James arrived the next morning with flowers and a teddy bear and promises to teach Lily about birds and trees and the importance of protecting the environment. My parents found out about Lily's birth through a mutual friend. Apparently, news traveled fast in our small social circle. I know this because exactly 1 week after I brought her home, a delivery truck arrived with an enormous gift basket from Tiffany Company. Inside was a sterling silver baby cup, engraved with Lily's initials, and a card that simply read, "Congratulations, the Blackwells. No love, no grandma and grandpa, no, we'd like to meet her. Just a formal acknowledgement that she existed, wrapped in expensive silver and impersonal politeness." I put the cup in a box in the closet and never used it. The years that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, part-time jobs, and careful budgeting. Marcus eventually went back to law school, studying at night while working during the day. I took online classes toward my degree, fitting coursework around Lily's naps and daycare schedules. We were exhausted, broke, and sometimes snappy with each other from the stress. But we were also happy in a way I'd never experienced growing up in my parents' house. A deep, quiet contentment that came from building something together, from watching Lily take her first steps in our cramped living room, from celebrating Marcus's law school graduation with pizza and cheap champagne. I didn't think about my parents much during those years. There was too much immediate life to live, too many small crises and tiny victories to focus on past hurts. But sometimes, usually late at night when I was feeding Lily or reviewing flashcards for an exam, the silence would hit me like a wave. They had chosen their disappointment over their daughter. They had chosen their reputation over their granddaughter. It was a choice that said everything about who they really were, underneath all that polish and success. By the time Lily was 5, our lives had stabilized considerably. Marcus had passed the bar and was working for a prestigious firm in Hartford, specializing in environmental law. I had finished my degree in social work and was working for a nonprofit that helped at-risk families navigate social services. We'd moved into a small house in a good school district, complete with a fenced backyard where Lily could play, and a front porch where we'd sit in the evenings watching her chase fireflies. It wasn't the life I'd planned at 19, but it was good. Better than good. It was ours. That's when the letter arrived. I found it in the mailbox on a Thursday evening, my mother's familiar handwriting on cream-colored stationery that probably cost more than our weekly grocery budget. My hands shook as I opened it. Maya, your father has been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. The doctors say he has maybe 2 years before the progression becomes severe. We know we have no right to ask anything of you after how we handled your pregnancy, but we would very much like to meet our granddaughter while your father can still remember her. We understand if you say no. We know we haven't earned the right to be in your lives, but we're hoping you might find it in your heart to give us a chance to try to make amends. With love and regret, Mom. I read it 3 times before the words really sank in. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and called Marcus at work. What do you think I should do? I asked after explaining the situation. There was a long pause before he answered. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to tell them it's too late, that they made their choice and now they have to live with it. And the other part? The other part thinks about Lily, about whether she deserves to know her grandparents, even if they were terrible to me. They weren't just terrible to you, Marcus said gently. They were terrible to her too. They've ignored her existence for 5 years. I know, but they're still her grandparents, and my father is dying Marcus. Whatever else he is, he's still my dad. When I hung up the phone, I found Lily in the living room, coloring at her small table. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes that were so much like Marcus's, her dark hair falling in waves around her face. Mama, why do you look sad? I knelt down beside her chair. Lily, sweetheart, how would you feel about meeting your other grandparents? The ones from Mama's side? She considered this seriously, as she did all important questions. Do they live far away? Is that why I haven't met them? How do you explain abandonment to a 5-year-old? How do you tell a child that her grandparents chose not to know her because they disapproved of her very existence? Something like that, I said finally. But they'd like to meet you now if you want to meet them. Do they know about my goldfish? And my bike? I'm sure they'd love to hear about those things. She nodded decisively. Okay, but can Daddy come too? Of course, baby. Daddy will definitely come too. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a family restaurant halfway between our house and theirs. I spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that was nice enough to show I'd made an effort, but not so fancy that it looked like I was trying to impress them. Lily wore her favorite pink sundress and the tiny pearl earrings Elena had given her for her birthday. She chattered excitedly in the car about all the things she wanted to tell her new grandparents. About kindergarten, about her best friend Sophie, about the butterfly garden she was growing with Daddy. Marcus squeezed my hand as we pulled into the restaurant parking lot. "You okay?" "Ask me afterward." They were already seated when we arrived, looking older than I remembered but still impeccably dressed. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and there was something vague about his expression that hadn't been there before. My mother sat ramrod straight, her hands folded perfectly in her lap, every inch the society matron. They stood when they saw us approaching, and for a moment we all just stared at each other across the years of silence and hurt. Then Lily, bless her fearless heart, bounced forward with a bright smile. "Hi, I'm Lily. Are you my grandparents?" My mother's composure cracked immediately. Her hands flew to her mouth and tears spilled over her carefully applied makeup. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, you're beautiful." My father looked confused for a moment, like he wasn't quite sure where he was. Then his eyes focused on Lily and his face transformed. "Hello there, sweetheart," he said in the gentle voice I remembered from my own childhood. "I'm your Grandpa Richard." "Grandpa Richard," Lily repeated solemnly, trying out the words. "I have other grandparents too. Abuela Elena and Abuelo James. They live in Vermont and they teach at a college." I saw my mother's smile falter slightly at the mention of Marcus's parents, but she recovered quickly. "That's wonderful, darling. We'd love to hear about them." The next hour was surreal. My parents, these people who had cut me out of their lives so completely, hung on Lily's every word as she regaled them with stories about her life. They laughed at her jokes, admired photos on my phone, and ordered her extra dessert when she finished her chicken nuggets. It was everything I had wanted them to do for me 5 years ago, and everything they hadn't done. "She's remarkable," my mother said quietly while Lily was in the bathroom with Marcus. "So confident, so articulate." "She gets that from Marcus," I said, not ready to give them any credit for Lily's wonderful qualities. "And from you," my father said suddenly, his eyes clearer than they'd been all evening. "You were always brave, Maya. Even as a little girl, you never backed down from what you believed in." The words hit me harder than any apology could have, because they were true, and because they proved that he had known me, really known me, and had chosen to reject me anyway. "Dad," I started, but he was already slipping away again, his attention wandering to something over my shoulder. "He has good days and bad days," my mother explained. "Today is a good day." When Marcus and Lily returned, my parents made tentative overtures about future visits. Could they take Lily to the zoo sometime? Would we consider having dinner at their house? Would it be okay if they sent her birthday presents? I found myself saying yes to things I'd never imagined I'd agree to, watching my daughter's face light up at the prospect of more grandparents to love her. As we prepared to leave, my mother caught my arm. "Maya, I know I can never undo what we did, but I want you to know, I've regretted it every single day for 5 years." "Then why didn't you call?" I asked. "Why did it take Dad getting sick for you to reach out?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Pride," she said finally. "Stupid, destructive pride. We kept telling ourselves we were waiting for you to apologize, but the truth is, we were too ashamed to admit how wrong we'd been. I had nothing to apologize for." I know that now. I think I knew it then, too, but I was so worried about what people would think, what they would say about our family. Our family was me and you and Dad. Everyone else was just noise. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "Can you ever forgive us?" I looked across the restaurant at Lily, who was showing my father how to make a paper airplane out of her napkin. At Marcus, who was patiently helping my confused father remember which fold came next. At these people who had hurt me so deeply, who were now trying so hard to love my daughter. "I'm working on it," I said finally. Over the following months, my parents became a regular part of Lily's life. They took her to museums and plays, taught her to play chess and piano, and showered her with the kind of attention and affection they'd never shown me at her age. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. My father's condition deteriorated faster than the doctors had predicted. By Christmas, he was having more bad days than good ones, often forgetting who we were or where he was. But with Lily, he was always gentle, even when he was confused. She seemed to understand with the intuitive wisdom of children that Grandpa Richard was sick, and she was endlessly patient with him. My mother threw herself into grandmotherhood with the same intensity she'd once applied to charity galas and hospital board meetings. She bought Lily expensive toys and clothes, enrolled her in ballet lessons, and talked constantly about the private schools she should attend. "She's trying to buy her way out of guilt," Marcus observed one evening after my mother had arrived with yet another elaborate gift. "Maybe," I said, "but she's also trying to love her. I can't fault her for that." "Can't you? She's giving Lily everything she never gave you." He was right, and it stung more than I wanted to admit. But what was the alternative? Cut my parents out again? Deny Lily the grandparents who clearly adored her because they'd failed me as parents? The situation came to a head the following spring when my mother called with a proposal. "We'd like to set up a college fund for Lily," she said. "Something substantial, enough to cover tuition and living expenses at any school she chooses." "Mom, that's incredibly generous, but there's more. We'd also like to add her to our will. As our only grandchild, she would inherit everything. The house, the investments, your father's practice when he's gone." I felt the room spin slightly. I need to think about this. Of course. But Maya, we won't be around forever. Your father's condition is getting worse, and I'm not getting any younger. We want to make sure Lily is taken care of. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wall for a long time. This was what I dreamed of as a child. My parents' approval, their support, their resources. But they weren't offering it to me. They were offering it to my daughter, as if they could somehow skip over the part where they'd failed me as parents and go straight to being perfect grandparents. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked when I told him about the conversation. "I'm thinking they're trying to buy forgiveness they haven't earned." And? And I'm thinking it's not their forgiveness to buy. It's Lily's inheritance, not mine. Who am I to turn down opportunities for her because I'm still angry at them? But even as I said it, I felt the old resentment burning in my chest. They'd kicked me out with nothing, forced me to struggle and scrape and build a life from scratch. Now they wanted to hand my daughter everything they denied me, as if money could somehow make up for love withheld. My father died on a Tuesday in May during one of his rare lucid moments. I was holding his hand when he looked at me with clear eyes and said, "I'm sorry, Maya, for all of it. You were the best of us, and we nearly destroyed you." They were the last coherent words he ever spoke to me. The funeral was everything I'd expected. Elegant, well-attended, full of people who praised my father's contributions to medicine and the community. I gave a eulogy that focused on his professional accomplishments and his love for his granddaughter, carefully skirting around the complicated reality of our relationship. Afterward, at the reception, I overheard two of his colleagues talking. "Such a tragedy about his daughter," one said, "getting pregnant so young, throwing away all that potential." "But look at her now," the other replied. "Married to that environmental lawyer, raising that lovely little girl. Sometimes these things work out despite our worst fears." I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to tell them that it had worked out not despite anything, but because I had made it work out. Because I had fought for my family and my future when no one else would. Instead, I smiled politely and moved on, because that's what you do at funerals. You swallow your anger and your hurt, and you focus on what matters. In this case, comforting my grieving mother and helping Lily understand that Grandpa Richard wasn't coming back. 6 months later, my mother called with unexpected news. "I'm selling the house," she said. "It's too big for just me, and honestly, there are too many memories here. I'm going to buy a smaller place closer to you and Marcus." "Mom, you don't have to." "I want to. I want to be close to Lily while she's growing up. I want to be the kind of grandmother I never learned how to be a mother." There it was, the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. "What about your friends?" Your life here? My life is where my family is. It took me too long to learn that lesson. She moved into an elegant townhouse just 10 minutes from our home that fall. True to her word, she became a devoted grandmother, attending Lily's school plays and soccer games, helping with homework, and taking her on weekend adventures. She also, slowly and carefully, began trying to rebuild a relationship with me. It wasn't easy. There were years of hurt between us, patterns of criticism and defensiveness that were hard to break. But we tried, for Lily's sake and maybe for our own. The breakthrough came the following Christmas when Lily asked why I didn't have any baby pictures in our family albums. Grandma Margaret has lots of pictures of Daddy when he was little, she said, referring to Elena. But I've never seen pictures of you as a baby, Mama. I glanced at my mother, who was sitting quietly in the corner, her hands folded in her lap. I don't have those pictures anymore, sweetheart, I said carefully. Why not? Before I could answer, my mother spoke up. Because I have them, she said quietly. I kept all your mother's baby pictures and photo albums. I never gave them back to her when she moved out. The admission hung in the air between us. Another small cruelty revealed, another wound acknowledged. Would you like to see them, Lily? My mother continued. I could bring them over sometime. Yes, Lily clapped her hands excitedly. I want to see what Mama looked like when she was my age. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, my mother and I sat in my living room with glasses of wine and the weight of everything unsaid between us. I kept all of it, she said finally. Your baby clothes, your school awards, your artwork from kindergarten. I told myself I was preserving memories, but really I think I was punishing myself. Looking at it every day, remembering what I'd thrown away. Mom, let me finish, please. She took a shaky breath. I was so scared when you told us you were pregnant. Not scared for you. Scared for us. For our reputation, our standing in the community. I was more worried about what the neighbors would think than about whether my daughter needed my support. You were protecting the life you'd built. I was protecting an image, and I sacrificed my real life, my relationship with you, my chance to know my granddaughter from the beginning, to preserve something that didn't actually matter. We sat in silence for a while, both of us crying quietly. I can't undo it, she said finally. I can't go back and be the mother you needed when you were 19 and scared and facing the biggest challenge of your life. But I can try to be the mother you need now, and the grandmother Lily deserves. I'd like that, I whispered. Would you? Really? Even after everything? I looked around my small, warm living room, at the pictures of Lily and Marcus and our little family on the mantle, at the couch where we watched movies on Friday nights, at the bookshelf full of stories we read together before bed. This house wasn't grand or impressive, but it was full of love in a way my childhood home had never been. I'm not the same person I was when I left your house, I said. The scared 19-year-old who needed your approval and support. She's gone. But the woman I am now, she could use a mom sometimes, and my daughter could definitely use her grandmother. I promise I won't try to take over or criticize how you're raising her. I know I don't have the right. Mom, you're her grandmother. You have the right to spoil her and teach her things and love her unconditionally. That's what grandparents are for. She was crying again, but this time they were happy tears. I love her so much, Maya. And I'm so proud of the mother you've become. You did everything right, everything I should have done. I made mistakes too. I'm still making them. But you're making them from love, not fear. That makes all the difference. 2 years later, at Lily's 8th birthday party, I watched my mother helping her blow out the candles on a homemade cake while Marcus's parents cheered from across the table. Elena and my mother had become unexpected friends, bonding over their shared adoration of Lily and their mutual love of crossword puzzles. James was teaching my mother about birds, patiently explaining the difference between cardinals and robins while she took careful notes in a small notebook. She'd taken up birdwatching as a hobby, she said, because it's never too late to learn something new. Later, as we cleaned up, my mother pulled me aside. I have something for you, she said, handing me a thick envelope. I've been meaning to give this to you for a while. Inside were dozens of photographs. Me as a baby, as a toddler, blowing out birthday candles and opening Christmas presents and playing in the backyard of my childhood home. There were school pictures and dance recital photos, and a picture of me at my high school graduation, beaming with pride in my cap and gown. At the bottom of the stack was a letter written in my father's careful handwriting. The date showed it was written just a few months before his diagnosis. Maya, if you're reading this, it means your mother finally found the courage to give it to you, and I'm probably not here anymore to say these words myself. I was wrong. Not just about the way I handled your pregnancy, but about everything that came after. I was so focused on the future we had planned for you that I couldn't see the future you were creating for yourself. You became exactly the kind of woman I always hoped you would be. Strong, independent, compassionate, fierce in defense of what matters to you. You just did it in a way I didn't expect, and my pride couldn't accept that. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know that every day since you left, I have regretted letting my disappointment matter more than my love for you. You deserved better from me. You deserved better from both of us. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to let us try again. Not as the parents we were, but as the people we could still become. Oh, my love, Dad. I read it twice before I could trust my voice to speak. When did he write this? About 6 months before he got sick. He gave it to me and made me promise to give it to you if anything happened to him. I was supposed to give it to you at the funeral, but I couldn't. I was afraid you'd think it was too little, too late. Was it? Too little, too late? I thought about the question seriously. My father was gone. I would never have the chance to have the relationship with him that I'd wanted as a child, or even the chance to fully forgive him face to face. His apology, heartfelt as it was, couldn't undo the years of silence or the pain of feeling rejected by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But it could give me something else. Closure, understanding, and maybe most importantly, the knowledge that in the end he had seen me clearly and been proud of who I'd become. No, I said finally. It's not too late. It's exactly on time. Lily is 10 now. Confident and kind and completely unaware that her existence once caused such upheaval in our family. She adores all her grandparents equally, collecting stories and wisdom from each of them like precious treasures. From Elena and James, she's learned about justice and equality and the importance of protecting the environment. From my mother, she's learned about art and music and the power of making a good impression. From the memory of my father, preserved in the stories we tell her, she's learned about perseverance and the importance of admitting when you're wrong. Marcus and I finally got married last year, in a small ceremony in our backyard with both sets of parents in attendance. It wasn't the grand wedding my mother had probably envisioned for me, but it was perfect. Full of love and laughter and the kind of joy that comes from fighting for something together and winning. My mother has become one of my closest friends, which would have seemed impossible 10 years ago. We talk almost every day, about everything from Lily's latest adventures to my work with at-risk families to her new hobby of watercolor painting. She's still opinionated and sometimes critical, but now it comes from love rather than disappointment, and I'm strong enough to push back when I need to. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my parents had reacted differently that morning in the kitchen. If they had hugged me instead of rejecting me, supported me instead of abandoning me, would I have become the same person I am now? Would I have developed the same strength, the same determination to create a life on my own terms? I don't think so. And as much as it hurt, as much as it still hurts sometimes, I think I'm grateful for that. Because the woman who walked out of my parents' house with nothing but a duffel bag and a fierce determination to prove them wrong became someone I'm proud to be. She became a mother who loves unconditionally, a partner who fights for her family, a daughter who found her way back to forgiveness without sacrificing her self-respect. The morning my parents kicked me out, they thought they were saving their reputation. Instead, they saved me from a life of living up to their expectations instead of my own, from the fear of disappointing people whose approval I didn't actually need. But the story doesn't end there. Because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a destination. It's a journey that requires constant choice and recommitment. Last month, Lily came home from school upset because one of her classmates had made a cruel comment about broken families during a discussion about different types of households. The teacher had been talking about single parents, divorced families, families with same sex parents, and families where grandparents were the primary caregivers. Emma said that kids from broken families always have problems. Lily told me, tears streaming down her face. She said her mom told her that children need both parents living together to be normal. I felt the familiar surge of protective anger, the same fire that had sustained me through those early years of struggle. But I also felt something else, sadness for Emma, a child who is already learning to judge others based on narrow definitions of normal. "What do you think, sweetheart?" I asked, pulling Lily onto my lap. "Do you feel broken?" She considered the question seriously, as she always did. "No," she said finally. "I feel loved. By you and Daddy and Abuela Elena and Abuelo James and Grandma. That's a lot of love for one person. More than some people get in a lifetime," I agreed. "But Mama, why do some people think families like ours are wrong?" It was the kind of question that could have sent me spiraling into bitterness about all the judgment we'd faced over the years. Instead, I found myself thinking about my mother, who had spent so many years worried about what other people thought that she'd nearly lost what actually mattered. "Sometimes people are afraid of things that are different from what they know," I said carefully. "And sometimes, when people are hurting or insecure about their own lives, they make themselves feel better by putting down others. Like when Emma's parents got divorced last year and she was really mean to everyone for a while?" Exactly like that. Hurt people sometimes hurt other people. So what should I do when people say mean things about our family? I thought about all the responses I could give her, about standing up for herself, about educating ignorant people, about not letting others' opinions define her self-worth. But what I said was simpler and I hoped more powerful. "Love them anyway," I said. "Not because they deserve it, but because love is stronger than fear, and kindness is stronger than cruelty. And sometimes, when people see you being happy and confident despite their predictions of doom, it makes them question whether they were right in the first place." It was a lesson I'd learned the hard way, that the best revenge against people who doubt you isn't proving them wrong through anger, but proving them wrong through joy. This philosophy was tested just a few weeks later when my mother called with news that rocked our carefully reconstructed family peace. "I ran into the Hendersons at the grocery store today," she said, her voice tight with old anger. "They asked about Lily, and when I showed them pictures, Carol Henderson had the audacity to say, well, she certainly turned out lovely despite the circumstances of her birth." I could hear the hurt in my mother's voice, not just for herself, but for me and for Lily. She'd become fiercely protective of our family, like a lioness who'd found her cubs. "What did you say?" I asked. "I said that Lily turned out lovely because of the circumstances of her birth, because she has parents who chose to love her before she was even born, and because she's being raised by people who value courage over conformity." I felt tears prick my eyes. This was the mother I'd needed all those years ago, the one who would fight for her child instead of worrying about what the neighbors thought. "I'm proud of you, Mom." I should have said that to Carol Henderson 15 years ago. I should have told everyone who whispered about our family scandal that my daughter was braver at 19 than most people are in their entire lives. You're saying it now. That's what matters. Is it enough? Will it ever be enough? The question hung between us, loaded with years of regret and the desperate hope for redemption. I thought about my father's letter, about the grace I'd found to forgive him after his death. I thought about Lily's easy acceptance of all her grandparents' flaws and virtues. I thought about the woman I'd become, not in spite of my parents' rejection, but partially because of it. "It has to be," I said finally, "because the alternative is spending the rest of our lives prisoners to the past." But forgiveness, I was about to learn, is more complicated than I'd thought. Because just when I thought our family had found its equilibrium, life threw us another curveball. It started with a phone call from a lawyer. Not Marcus's firm, but someone I'd never heard of. My mother had been in a car accident, he said. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to require surgery and a long recovery. More importantly, the accident had been caused by a young mother who'd been texting while driving, and my mother was considering a substantial lawsuit. The other driver was completely at fault, the lawyer explained when I met with him. "Your mother has a strong case for both medical expenses and pain and suffering. We're looking at a settlement in the high 6 figures, possibly 7. I should have felt relieved that the money would cover my mother's medical bills and help her through her recovery. Instead, I felt a familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. What does my mother want to do? That's what she'd like to discuss with you. She's asked me to present you with an option. The option, as it turned out, was this. My mother wanted to donate the entire settlement to the nonprofit where I worked, establishing a fund to help young mothers in crisis, women who found themselves pregnant, scared, and abandoned by their families. She wants to call it the Lily Rose Foundation, the lawyer said, to help other young women who might find themselves in the position you were in 15 years ago. I sat in stunned silence, processing the implications. My mother wanted to turn her accident, and the other driver's mistake, into something that could help women like I'd been. She wanted to create the support system for other young mothers that she'd failed to provide for me. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and somehow perfectly fitting, but it was also complicated. The other driver, I said slowly. The one who caused the accident. What's her situation? The lawyer consulted his notes. 23 years old, single mother of 2. She was on her way to pick up her kids from daycare when she got a text from her ex about missing a child support payment. She looked down to respond and ran the red light. Is she facing charges? Reckless driving, likely. Her insurance will cover most of your mother's medical bills, but a lawsuit this size could bankrupt her. I felt the familiar tug of empathy that had led me into social work in the first place. Here was another young mother, probably scared and overwhelmed, who'd made a split-second mistake that could destroy her life. How could I feel good about my mother creating a foundation to help women like her while simultaneously destroying another woman in a similar situation? I need to talk to my mother, I said. I found her in the hospital, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her, surrounded by flowers and get-well cards from the various clubs and organizations she'd joined over the years. But her eyes were bright and alert, and she smiled when she saw me. Did you talk to the lawyer? She asked without preamble. I did. Mom, are you sure about this? It's a lot of money to give away. What else am I going to do with it? Buy another house I don't need? Take cruises I don't want? Maya, I have more money than I could spend in 2 lifetimes, but this could actually make a difference. What about the other driver? The woman who hit you? My mother's expression grew thoughtful. What about her? She's a single mother, Mom. 2 kids struggling financially. A lawsuit this big could ruin her life. She made a choice to text and drive. Actions have consequences. You made a choice to kick me out when I was pregnant. Did you deserve to lose me forever because of one terrible decision? The words hung between us like a challenge. My mother was quiet for a long moment, her fingers worrying the edge of her hospital blanket. What are you suggesting? She asked finally. I'm suggesting that maybe real justice isn't about punishment. Maybe it's about prevention. Instead of suing her into bankruptcy, what if we used this as an opportunity to help both her and other women like her? Over the next hour, we worked out a different plan. My mother would still establish the Lily Rose Foundation, but instead of funding it with a lawsuit settlement, she would use a portion of her own savings. The other driver would be required to do community service with the foundation, helping other young mothers navigate social services, sharing her story about the dangers of distracted driving, becoming part of the solution instead of just a cautionary tale. You realize this means giving up a lot of money? I asked. Money I never earned in the first place, my mother replied. Besides, some things are worth more than money. Like what? She smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw the woman who had read me bedtime stories and taught me to braid my hair, the mother I'd loved before I'd learned to fear her disappointment. Like the chance to be proud of the choices I make instead of ashamed of them. The Lily Rose Foundation launched 6 months later, with a mission to support young mothers through crisis pregnancies and beyond. We provided everything from prenatal care and parenting classes to job training and childcare assistance. But more than that, we provided what I had needed most 15 years earlier: unconditional support and the message that an unplanned pregnancy wasn't the end of a young woman's story, but potentially the beginning of a different and equally valuable chapter. Sarah, the young woman who had hit my mother's car, became one of our first success stories. Through the Foundation's job training program, she learned bookkeeping skills and eventually became our office manager. More importantly, she became a living example for other young mothers that mistakes don't have to define you, that you can make amends and move forward and build something better. At our first annual fundraising gala, I stood at the podium looking out at a room full of people who had come to support our mission. My mother sat at the head table, radiant in a silver gown, beaming with pride. Marcus and Lily were at a table near the front, along with Elena and James. Sarah was there too, along with dozens of other young mothers whose lives had been touched by our programs. 15 years ago, I began, I found myself 19, pregnant and thrown out of my family home. I thought my life was over. I thought I had failed everyone who mattered and disappointed everyone who had ever believed in me. I paused, looking directly at my mother. I was wrong about a lot of things in that moment. But the biggest thing I was wrong about was thinking that failure was permanent, that one difficult choice would define me forever. I went on to talk about resilience and second chances, about the difference between punishment and justice, about the power of community to lift people up instead of tearing them down. But what I was really talking about was grace. The grace to forgive others their failures, and perhaps more importantly, the grace to forgive ourselves our own. Later, as the evening wound down, my mother and I stood together on the hotel balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Do you think she would be proud?" I asked, thinking of Lily, who was now almost 11 and growing more confident and compassionate every day. "I think she already is," my mother replied. "I think she sees the family we've built, all of us, together, and knows that love really can conquer everything. Even disappointment? Even pride? Even years of silence and hurt? Especially those things." She squeezed my hand. "Maya, I need you to know something. The morning you told us you were pregnant, when your father and I reacted so badly, that wasn't about you. It was about our own fears and insecurities and the pressure we put on ourselves to look perfect. I know that now. Do you? Really? Because I spent so many years thinking you had disappointed us, when the truth was, we had disappointed ourselves. We had raised a daughter who was brave enough to make hard choices and stand by them, and instead of celebrating that strength, we punished it because it wasn't the strength we had expected." I felt tears threatening again. Even now, after all these years, my mother's words had the power to heal wounds I thought had scarred over. "You turned out exactly as you should have," she continued. "Strong, compassionate, uncompromising when it comes to protecting the people you love. You became the woman I always hoped you would be. I just didn't recognize her when she first appeared. And now? Now I see her clearly, and I'm so proud of her that it takes my breath away." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, mother and daughter, two women who had hurt each other and found their way back to love. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the city, cars and sirens and life continuing in all its messy, complicated glory. "Mom," I said finally. "Yes?" "Thank you for not giving up on us, for finding your way back." "Thank you," she replied, "for leaving the door open." Lily is 13 now, in that awkward phase between childhood and adolescence, where she's both wise beyond her years and charmingly naive about the complexities of adult relationships. She knows the basic facts of our family's history, that her grandparents and I had a big fight when she was born, that we didn't speak for several years, that we eventually reconciled. What she doesn't know, and what I hope she'll never need to know, is how close we came to never finding our way back to each other. How pride and fear and the weight of expectations nearly destroyed something that should have been unbreakable. But she understands forgiveness in a way that amazes me. When her friend betrays her trust, or when Marcus and I have one of our rare but heated arguments, she doesn't hold grudges or keep score. She feels her hurt, processes it, and moves forward with an open heart. "Life's too short to stay mad forever," she told me recently, when I was struggling with a difficult decision at work involving a colleague who had undermined one of my projects. "Where did you learn that?" I asked. "From you," she said simply. "From watching how you and Grandma worked things out. It struck me then that our family's story, with all its pain and reconciliation, had given Lily something precious. The knowledge that relationships can survive even serious wounds, that love is stronger than pride, and that it's never too late to choose forgiveness over resentment. These are lessons I'm still learning myself. Every day brings new opportunities to choose grace over judgment, understanding over anger, hope over fear. Some days I succeed. Others, I fall back into old patterns of defensiveness or hurt. But I keep trying, because I know now what I didn't know at 19, that the most important battles we fight are often with ourselves, and the most meaningful victories are often invisible to everyone else. As I finish writing this story, I'm sitting in my kitchen. Not the grand, cold kitchen of my childhood, but the warm, lived-in kitchen of the home Marcus and I built together. Lily is at the table doing homework, occasionally asking for help with algebra or advice about friend drama. My mother is in the living room, reading a book to the children of one of our foundation families who come for Saturday tutoring sessions. It's an ordinary evening in an ordinary life, and it's everything I never knew I wanted. The broken mug from that morning 15 years ago is long since forgotten, swept up and thrown away. But the moment it created, that instant when everything changed, when I was forced to choose between who I had been and who I wanted to become, that moment reverberates still. Because the truth is, we're all just one decision away from a completely different life. One moment of courage or cowardice, one choice to speak up or stay silent, one decision to forgive or hold a grudge, and everything changes. My parents chose fear, and then they chose love. I chose defiance, and then I chose grace. We all chose again and again until we found our way back to each other. And maybe that's the real lesson here, that families aren't broken by conflict or even by cruelty. They're only broken when we stop choosing each other, stop believing that love is worth fighting for, stop hoping that people can change and grow and become better than they were. We are all imperfect people trying to love each other perfectly. Most of the time, we fail. But sometimes, if we're very lucky and very stubborn and very, very brave, we succeed in ways that transform not just our own lives, but the lives of everyone around us. The coffee mug shattered that morning, but my family didn't. It just took us 15 years to realize that broken things can be mended, that scattered pieces can be gathered back together, and that sometimes what we rebuild is stronger and more beautiful than what we started with. And in the end, that's enough. That's everything.